So I'm going to get started here. Thank you everybody for joining. My name is Kevin Cook, BrainSell Technologies. This is 6 steps to becoming a data-driven manufacturing and distribution company. We're going to get started here very soon, a little bit of introduction, and then go over the agenda. So first, I'd like to introduce the folks that are joining me here. Tony Berry is one of our lead architects, architects and analysts. Also, Jordan Berry is with us today. He is a developer and also an analyst and has done a lot of work on our modern data platform, which is the core technology that we're talking about today. I'm Kevin Cook, Executive Vice President here at BrainSell. That doesn't matter because these two gentlemen are the one with all the technical insights.
Well, thanks for having us, Kevin. Excited to be on.
It is nice to have you. Our agenda. Oh, we've got a lot to cover today, and we're going to make this as streamlined as possible while leaving some questions, some time for Q&A all through this conversation. If you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box. We will get to them maybe in line as we're discussing, but certainly at the end, we've made room for Q&A. We're going to talk about why being data-driven is important and why it can be hard or challenging to make that happen. We do have a game plan. Of course, nothing. If we didn't have a 6-step or a 3-step or a 2-step, this wouldn't be worth anything, would it? So we've got a few steps that you can look at that make this successful for you. And then we're going to talk about some people who have actually done this in real life. Throughout this entire conversation, I would urge you all to think about how this might apply to you. Think about your business and think about how the things that Tony and Jordan are talking about may be applicable to you, because that's really what's important here. Not, the lofty goals or the ideas, but how it's really applicable to your business. We've got several different types of manufacturers and distributors on today, but focus on your business. So now we've got a few poll questions. These are also going to help you think about the things that you might, the things that you need to do. These poll questions maybe not be scientific, but we want you to be able to see, we want you to be able to get an idea of what you can do here. So this is hopefully going to help you in your thinking. So how many key performance indicators do you use to manage your business every day? This poll is open right now. Poll's in progress. So select one of those. A key performance indicator, how many calls we make, how many sales we make, how many something. Think about your KPIs and let us know. This is going to be really important, I think. So you get a few 33% so far. Yeah, okay. Looks like you guys have a lot of KPIs. So the majority, 2/3 of you, said that you have 10 or more KPIs that you manage every day. That's great. That's good. Must be tough if you have a lot. Okay. Our next poll question is related. How many key important technology platforms do you have? Now, that could be a line of business tool like a CRM, an ERP, or general ledger, accounting. It could also be a spreadsheet, so think about the things that you're using, those technology platforms that might feed into your business. Okay, yeah, people are filling that in. It looks pretty evenly split. Okay, yeah. It was evenly split. Towards the end, we found out that most people only have 2 primary technology platforms. That's interesting. It's interesting. Okay, our last question here, and this is going to help us pull it all together. How many of those platforms are connected? Now, most of you said you only have about 2. So are those 2 platforms integrated or connected? Do they talk to each other or not? So what percentage of the platforms that you use, your key technology platforms, are integrated with each other? Wow, everybody said that half of them. That's great. That's interesting. That is very interesting that we have unanimity. All right, that's going to inform our discussion here, those poll questions. So thank you very much for answering those. With that, I am going to be quiet here, and I'm going to hand the proverbial microphone over to the technology wizards we've got here. Tony and Jordan, please take over here and tell us about the becoming a data-driven company.
Great, yeah, thanks, Kevin. We're gonna spend just a few minutes kind of going through background, and then we'll get into the fun stuff, which is showing how to solve it and the demonstrations that we'll go through. But I'm assuming several of the people that are attending today might agree with this, that becoming data-driven is not trivial, it's not easy. In fact, I would put it in the hard category. And mainly that's because of what's happening in the world today with all the changes and the volume of data that is large and expanding. In fact, it's estimated that over 90% of the world's digital data has been created in the last 2 years. If you think about that, that's just a phenomenal thought that there's that much data being generated, and we probably all feel it. And probably the bigger challenge as you try and become data-driven is that data is not all in one place. I think even the polls today showed that with the minimum number of systems, one of you had being 2 and some being 5 or more. And so what that means is the data is scattered, and it's this concept of being siloed. So a lot of times today you'll find it will be within a department or an area of the business, but it's not necessarily available to others who may need that information, to make decisions or to gain insights. And one of the things that we've seen, having been in the space for a long time and candidly been an integrator and somebody that integrates systems, is integration can be tough. It's often slow. We probably all that have tried it have experienced the fact that it can sometimes be error prone. Sometimes these integrations break with some of the current implementation approaches. And so candidly, while the exercise is very important, it's not easy. And so one of the reasons for that we think things are a bit challenging today is the current approaches were really designed before this data explosion and scattering occurred. And so we've probably, all of us, if we were to take another poll, use spreadsheets probably on a daily basis. And most people we find use more than one. And it's this concept we call spreadsheet madness, where, okay, who has the latest version of this spreadsheet? Who made that last edit? Is that data correct? Can we trust it? How do I make this link up to the other spreadsheet? And oftentimes you'll get in the VLOOKUP craziness, we call it, and that's really what spreadsheet madness is all about. And it's just spreadsheets were not designed for this size and volume of data. And so what a lot of times has been attempted, and it sounds like that's the case here with a couple of you as attendees, is you try and do these point-to-point integrations. So I try and connect my CRM to my ERP, and I may try and get my website integrated into that. And so I have a bunch of, essentially, just like the diagram here, a bunch of different connections between the systems, but it's typically going to look at that point-to-point problem, but not look at everything holistically in that view across all the systems and the data that they may contain. As an example, customers live in many cases in more than just your CRM, more than just your ERP. They're also typically in your marketing system. They may be on your website if they're in kind of an earlier lead prospecting stage. So there's a lot of places that information resides, and point-to-point integrations just break down because you have so many places you need to go get that data from. And so what's happening today, and some of you may be doing this, is a lot of times what we're finding now is organizations will form what they call a data team, often led by a data scientist, who will then try and pull this data together so that you can get that ad hoc kind of informational, informative, and maybe even AI-based reporting. But the hidden challenge there is, if you look at this, in most cases, data scientists will tell you they spend 80% of their time working on those first two, bringing spreadsheets together, getting those integrations pulled together, and only 20% on the actual data science, the idea of actually pulling that data together. So a recent poll showed that businesses are struggling because of this. And as I just mentioned, 80% of the time, think about that, 4 days out of a 5-day week are spent manually finding, cleaning, and organizing data. And only 1 day a week is spent on actually making business decisions off that data. And if you look underneath further, it's not only that, but most organizations say that about 70% of the data that's being generated, even though it's valuable, and they want to use it for analytics and reporting, it goes unused because you basically just can't get to it because of the way some of the technologies work today. So it's a struggle. And candidly, it's like we said earlier, it's not an easy thing to do. So you may ask yourself, well, gosh, is it even worth trying to do this? Should I think about changing it? Well, you should, because first of all, it creates a lack of visibility that really impacts the whole organization. And I think the last 2 years have really shown us how important that is when we're not always in the same office anymore. And so executives struggle, management team struggles, operationally, sometimes you don't get the data you need in a timely fashion. And then customer service, who really is now the point people on a lot of this, are getting those calls from a customer where the customer expects that you know them and you know all about them and that you have visibility into all your systems. And so it really becomes a big organizational challenge. And so again, gosh, is it really worth going through all this exercise? Well, it definitely is, because what McKinsey found in a study recently is they started looking at, well, those companies that go through this challenge and they accomplish this idea of becoming data-driven, especially in the manufacturing and distribution space, are 23 times more likely to acquire a new customer versus a competitor that's not data-driven. Think about that, 23 times more likely. And they're 6 times as likely to retain those customers, again, because when a customer does call in and ask for service, the data-driven company is going to know most everything about them. And the last statistic is the one that to me is really the reason this is so important, that those that go through this effort are 19 times as likely to be profitable as a result. Think about that. Means 19 out of 20 are not as profitable as the one that does become data-driven. So it's a really compelling statistic, and we think it's the reason organizations should go through this exercise. So let's do this first. Let's talk about what we mean by a data-driven company. And then Jordan's going to talk about the game plan to actually get you there. And so we really think there's 5 key attributes of a data-driven company. First of all, they really start to treat data as a valuable asset. And they understand that that asset needs to be treated like any other asset in the organization. It really needs to be thought about, needs to be governed, needs to be managed. And you need to look at it in a way that, how can I gain those real-time insights that are laying locked up in all these business systems and really start to make this one of the key initiatives in the organization. Now, these insights also need to now be available in a way for those in the organization that are making decisions, all levels, that they have the data that they need, and most importantly, in the format that they need, so that they can make those decisions that are data informed. And as we talked about, it really is all functional areas of the organization. It isn't just sales, it isn't just finance, it isn't just the manufacturing or the other sides of the business. All functional areas, I suggest, will say that they need more and better organized data to make those informed decisions. And then the fourth piece is these insights are surfaced at the right time and typically in a consolidated single place, typically the system of choice for the user. So customer service, it would be in the customer service application. If it's an executive, it's going to typically be in some form of a dashboard, but surface that up where the work is being done so that those decisions can be made faster. And what's really interesting about data is decisions are data. So and this is where AI can help a great deal. So as you do make informed decisions, and you do things or start an initiatives, make sure the results of those decisions are captured and pulled back in as new data elements that will help you improve in terms of your future insights.
Hey, Tony, let me ask you a question. I want to interrupt you. Isn't this just a BI tool? Something like Tableau or Power BI? Isn't this just the visualization tool? Or is there more to this than that?
Kevin, it's a great question, and Jordan's going to go through this in the game plan a little bit, but it is more. The BI tools are fantastic, and they really allow you kind of those last two things, the insight surfaced at the right time and the decisions then being used to go back to. But there's some work before that. We call it the plumbing of getting ready to become data informed. And so there is some work, and this is what makes it, somewhat of the challenge is now how do I get my data organized so that the BI tool, one, is accurate, and then it's being uploaded or refreshed. And we're actually going to show a couple examples of that with some BI tools. By doing a little bit of data work up front, now the BI tools can really start to do what they do, is those beautiful images that we can all very intuitively look at and become informed as we make decisions. But Kevin, it's a great question. They're one piece of the solution, I would suggest. So, and Jerome, why don't you go through kind of, I think the 6 steps will really show this, Kevin, and answer that question further.
Yeah, so that is a great question. Kind of to piggyback on that is that when you think about becoming data driven, a lot of times people think about the technology. That's really the first thing that comes to mind is, what BI tool do I need to pick, or which analyst I need to hire. But what they don't really think about is that, hey, it's really a full organization buy-in. So you need to make sure that you're aligning, the people, process, and technology. So everything from the high level strategy, where are we today, where are we going, who are the key individuals that are going to be championing these type of initiatives. What key processes are you going to try to get insights into? Obviously some are more important than others, and so you need to really focus on, how can you create the biggest impact in the shortest amount of time? And then once you really start to understand those mechanics of your business, that's where really the raw data and the technology that we all think about comes in. So, what are the data points? What are the rows of data that we're going to pull in? And then ultimately, how do we, not only connect that data so that it's available as we need it, but how do you blend and really pull the insights out of that data? So just want to touch on that first before we talk about the 6 steps. But as you start to, say, as an organization that you want to become data driven, once you make that commitment, and it is truly a cultural, a strategy commitment that you're no longer going to, just kind of, fly blind, but you're actually use data in a day-to-day, manner, then you need a game plan. How do you get there? And so this is really a proven approach that we've seen work with customers of various sizes. So everything from upper mid-market, $500 million enterprises, even into the the smaller companies, the $5 million, $10 million companies that are trying to maximize the investments that they've made. And so at the bottom there's quite a bit of text that kind of explains each of these. I'm just going to high level talk, but the first 3, as you'll notice, are very people centric. So first you got to understand the business need. What are the pain points that we're trying to solve? Then you really need to align the people, the process, and the technology. So kind of that slide that we talked to before, you got to get that buy-in across the organization. One thing that we'll see is that we'll come into organizations and they purchase a CRM tool, so they have pretty good sales metrics, or they have a marketing tool and they have good marketing metrics. But when you start to look at your customer holistically and you look at your own organization holistically, you need to get that buy-in across, across the departmental divides. Then number 3 is really, I would say, kind of a more challenging activity than it seems, is trying to understand where is all your data. A lot of times organizations will rely on, like Tony mentioned, spreadsheets, but to understand where did the data in that spreadsheet come from? Was it from a database? Was it from an email? Was it from a SaaS application? Really step 3 is just inventorying what are all the data points that we have. And to kind of stay on number 3 for a minute, one of the things that we see a lot of times is just even the vernacular around data is different. So a customer in one department may be different than a customer in another department, or an RMA may be one thing in the manufacturing side versus another thing in the customer service side. So just really getting the definitions and understanding as culturally, what does this data mean? Then steps 4, 5, and 6 is where technology starts to come into play. So number 4 is really, like, I would say, an adaptation of the volume and complexity of data. So no longer can you do a VLOOKUP type approach. So you really need to understand, once we have large sets of data across different systems that have different structure, everything from raw tabular data to even unstructured data. So data that may come from things like emails or images or video. How do you pull that data and connect it so that you can get the insights? One anecdote there is, while we're generating inside our organizations lots of data, so are our consumers, things like social media and all the things that they're putting out there, their preferences and things that they like and dislike. How can you start to connect some of that data into your own operational information as well? And then number 5 and 6 is really kind of the coup de grace of all this, is how do you then start to pull out the insights, understand not only what the data is, but then how do you take action and act on that data? So really what we'll see organizations do as they become more mature is you're not only looking backwards at what happened, but you're starting to look forwards at what might happen, what do we think will happen, and how do we proactively either hedge risk or take aggressive action so that we can grow faster and service our customers better. So that in the whole is the 6 steps, and each one takes time, and you have to be patient and understand that there are needs across the organization. But once you get all the way to step 6, it's really a life cycle. So like Tony mentioned, the decisions you make feed more data, which can be connected and blended, which gain more insights. So we like to call it's really the most renewable resource that you can generate within an organization.
And what's really interesting here, though, is steps 1 and 2, the foundational steps, are people and process, and it's not finding the BI tool, or it's not finding the integration. It's not it's the people and the process first. That's very interesting. It's great.
Awesome. And so ultimately, a lot of times we'll get is, once I have all this data in a single location, or I can access it across my organization, what does that immediately look like? And I would say the most tangible thing that it looks like is that you can now confidently answer questions. So a lot of times before becoming data-driven, you'll be in a board meeting or a departmental meeting, and you'll have all these questions arise of, what is my sell-through rate with key distributors, or which of my SKUs have the highest margins? And it may take several days or a week or two just to pull the answer to one question. And once you have a data-driven system, a modern data platform, you can start to answer these questions much quicker. And not only quicker, you have more confidence in them. So not only are you pulling a number back, but you're feeling confident that's the number, so you can take action on. That's kind of the one fallacy with spreadsheets and things is, while you may get to an answer, that data may be immediately stale. And so you're making a decision on data that isn't necessarily real in the real world. And so again, these are just some of the questions that our customers, especially in the manufacturing distribution space, have now been able to answer with this type of process and system.
And Jordan, I want to just make a comment. The one I love is the one down at the bottom right. We have a couple customers that now, this idea of taking data and having it informed decisions is, what product should we introduce? We've had a couple customers that, by looking at what they were getting as what was perceived as service issues, ended up being actually product opportunities. And so they've been able to introduce some new products off the result that came from the customer service group. And it was some of that, that ad hoc and structured data that Jordan was talking about that provided those just great insights into what maybe the product portfolio should look like.
It sounds like they may not have even known that without the right data structure in place.
Yeah, it was funny. The client we were working with thought they needed some new products, but they weren't sure which one was most important. And so by digging into that unstructured data, they could see what the asks were for some of the issues. In this case, it was an add-on, essentially an accessory for one of their main products.
Yeah, that is a great point as well, Kevin, is that a lot of times, like I mentioned, there's this life cycle of data. And it's amazing, you start asking questions and receiving answers, how many more questions get generated from that. The ability to go 1 level deep and then go 2 levels deep. And then eventually you're not only seeing those insights, but you're seeing root causes, and you're seeing things that you can hedge against or update. And that's really just the base layer of data. We haven't even talked about AI and machine learning and some of the predictive aspects as well. So.
Right, you may not even known what questions to ask on that 3rd layer until you saw that 1st and 2nd layer. So the questions don't even present themselves until you start an analysis.
Absolutely. And so did want to highlight from a technology standpoint, what does this look like? What is the transition away? And I know Tony hinted at this early in some of the current approaches, and you can really think of the kind of the old way, or may currently be the way that a lot of organizations are set up, is that they'll invest in various systems. They'll invest in an accounting system, an ERP system, an inventory tracking system, a return system, et cetera. And you want system A to talk to B and system B to talk to C, and you inevitably end up with this web of interconnectedness. And so really the new approach that we're going to talk about is called a modern data platform. It's this idea of how do you holistically connect this data so you really have one entry point so that you can view what's going on in your organization. And so what this looks like, and this is really a kind of a logical diagram, but you may have heard the term, data warehouse. You may have also heard the term data lake. And really the pendulum has swung. So originally, data warehouses were on-premise, used to really hold data for financial reporting, auditing, that type of thing. And then into the early 2000s, as the cloud became prevalent, people would start to just dump as much data as they could into a data lake. And we've inevitably ended up at this, harmony in the middle that is often referred to as a lake house or a logical data warehouse. And it looks a lot like this. You have, inputs on the left. So you may be pulling data in from, raw data sources, so databases, files, even some of those systems that we've talked about. Then once the data is in the middle in the lake house, you may have certain analysts or systems kind of analyze that. That's the people represented above. And then ultimately on the right-hand side is all the valuable insights surfaced through different mechanisms. So, and we're going to demo, several different use cases of this, but you may use this to build dashboards in tools like Power BI and Tableau. You may want or plan to build AI machine learning models. Just to spend a little bit of time here, I'm sure a lot of people are seeing this in the news and different industry publications about how AI and machine learning is really changing the landscape for different industries. But I would say from our interaction with different customers, a lot of people aren't quite ready for AI and ML yet. And so the thing that they're planning for is how do we future-proof? How do we make sure that we have a system that we can train models, that we can build predictive mechanisms down the road, even if today we're not quite ready for that? Because in that interconnected web of mismatched systems, it's really hard to train and build predictive modeling. And then ultimately, how do you operationalize that data? So once you have these unique insights in the middle, how do you provide that data to the operational sides of your business? And we'll show an example of that today. Is how do you surface near real-time insights within an operational system like a customer service tool, so that you have those insights not only at the executive level but at the fingertips of any user that really needs to act and act on behalf of their customer. And finally, at the bottom, just want to highlight that this is really built on modern enterprise-grade infrastructure. So it's a cloud agnostic approach. So whether you're in Amazon or in Microsoft Azure or even in Google, it's really backed by enterprise level technology. So everyone from Amazon and Netflix down to companies that are really just budding startups can use the same approach, use the same infrastructure, and really get started in a cost-effective way. And so I think with that, we'd like to switch to the more interactive piece of the webinar. The fun part.
Yeah.
So we're going to walk through a couple scenarios. Essentially, we've got 3 different customer scenarios. So we'll give you kind of a quick background for each slide, and then we'll switch over to the actual technology pieces and show you how we implemented and served up some of this data. So the first one that we want to highlight, I'll start with this, and then I'll pass the mic off to Tony, is a customer that really want to provide VIP customer experience. So they were a distribution company. They were in several different countries actually. And one of the challenges they had is that they were a very seasonal organization. So they were in the kind of the pool business, especially you can imagine post-COVID, the demand for backyards and pools and relaxation while you're stuck at home was very, very high. And so one of the things that they chose to do was take this modern data approach of how can we surface things like order inventory, previous orders for customers, and show that in their customer service tool, which in this case is Zendesk. And so let me go ahead and switch over to that actual demo and kind of walk through some of the really unique things that they were able to surface. Let me get out of the PowerPoint mode. Switch this over here. So hopefully everyone is seeing the Zendesk window. So if you're not familiar, this is the tool that they chose, but there are many other customer service tools out there. So it's fairly tool agnostic, but did just kind of want to highlight what the tool can do. So in this use case, imagine as a customer service rep, someone calls in that they have purchased chlorine from us for years and years, and that they just got a batch that had a broken nozzle. And so in this case, as a customer service rep, when I click in here, I can see who requested it. I can see what the complaint was. And one of the things I really want to know is, have they ordered this chlorine in the past? How much have they ordered? Are they one of our VIP customers, or is this their first time working with us? And you imagine the way that I might handle this would differ based on, whether they're a regular that comes in all the time, or maybe they just switched over from a different provider. And so by, if I'm flying blind and I don't have that information, I may treat this customer in a way that they're unexpecting, or may not have that history to be able to dialogue with them. Or you could even see the individual product and say, hey, you actually ordered a different size that you hadn't in the past. Was that intentional? it creates a great background for upsell, cross-sell, all kinds of different ways to interact with the customer. And so really what we did is underneath this is you can think that Lakehouse platform. And on the right-hand side, we created a custom application so that they could surface their data. And so this is actually using one of our frameworks called Sidekick. But as you can see, as I switch between tickets or I'm looking at a particular requester, I can see all their recent orders. So I can see which orders they placed, I can see how much they were, I can see how many products they ordered, etc. And I can click in and I can actually drill into that information. So for this particular order, I can see the subtotals, I can see the products that they purchased, I can see a lot of really unique information that allows me to interact with this customer in a really unique way. And again, so that's just one way of surfacing that data in context in an operational fashion. And your use case may be slightly different, but just imagine some of that data that if you had it at your fingertips, how much better you could service your customer.
Yeah, and Jordan, what I love about that, and it's so fluid that you don't even think about it, but the data on the right is actually not in Zendesk, right? It's being pulled in context live from that Lakehouse. And to me, that's always what amazes me is that, think if you had to push all that into Zendesk, you'd have to run on a cycle every hour or something like that. And that's what going pretty much near real time, right over to that data.
Yeah, so as the users are placing orders, you're now able to see them really quickly within the system, which is awesome. And like Tony said, we're not copying, we're not moving the data. We're actually able to just surface those insights in context in a separate tool.
Yeah, no, I think that's a lot of ETL tools work that way. They take the data from the source and push it into, store it as a copy of that data into the destination. And if you've got that, like Jordan, you had that web of integrations, you could have multiple things being stored, multiple pieces of data being stored and duplicated in different places at different times. Then they could change, and may change here but not there. And so you're also taking up storage space inside tools. And yeah, so this is a unique differentiator, very unique.
Yeah, we've got another customer using Zendesk too, but in this case, they're letting partners come in through the portal, and the same idea, but now that Sidekick framework is figuring out what partner they're taught, what is signed in, and it is pulling the data over that way. So it's just it's really interesting when you reverse this stuff, how it kind of changes the dynamics. And I think you're pushing to me now, right, Jordan?
Yep, I just shifted over to you. So I know you're going to walk through the next use case and demo.
Yeah, is my screen sharing, everybody?
Sure, looks great.
Great, so I'm going to pop over. I popped over first into the demo versus the discussion. So Jordan showed, kind of at the operational level. So somebody setting in the contact center, answering calls, dealing with a customer, gauging them at this point. This is a similar concept, but now think of it the other way. And so this is getting a little bit more into, kind of the sales management, account management side, and it's taking advantage of some of the analytics that this organization already had. But a little bit of background, this is a company that both manufactures products and basically white labels or distributes other things, and they do that through a retail channel. So a lot of retail mom and pop type stores that they're selling their product and others too. And so if you think of their kind of sales desk as their account managers are dealing with those partners on a day-to-day basis, a couple things, they all have literally hundreds of customers that they're dealing with. And those customers are buying several dozen different product categories, and it's probably thousands of SKUs underneath that. And yet they need to have that information at hand when they're talking to each of those partners as they're essentially cycling through their account list. And this organization had already, Kevin, it's a great question that you had asked, had already invested a lot in a BI tool. And so as we started to look at that, what we realized is a lot of the data for the Lakehouse was already in a pretty good format. And so we moved that, basically kind of took advantage of that and started to surface it up, and that's what I'm going to show you now. But this is coming, just so everyone understands where this analytics data is coming from, two operational systems, a point of sale system, and in this case it's Sugar CRM, and we wanted to link all of those together. So again, this is not a point to point, but what it's doing is, let me pop the system up. But that's not what we want.
That's very interesting.
It's free now.
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is the Sugar system, and so essentially what you'll see, if you haven't seen Sugar is a CRM tool. Like most of the CRM tools, it works off this concept of lists and then detailed records inside it. But what you'll see when I'm sitting here on my account list is off to the right, I actually have two embedded dashboards. And what's really interesting is in this case, it's Power BI, but it could be Tableau, it could be Click, it could be any of the kind of analytics tools. But what you'll see is that's embedded inside the tool, inside Sugar. But what's really interesting is Sugar, just like Jordan showed before, through the Lakehouse is talking to Power BI and essentially telling it, one, I'm on a list, and this is the people that are the accounts that are in that list, and I'd like you to summarize all the sales and all the product revenue for those lists. So as I change lists, the charts on the right will change, but where it gets really exciting is imagine this is my call list for the day. And I'm going to work through this, and as I'm talking to each of these partners, I'm checking their inventory levels, I'm seeing what their sell-through is, I'm showing how they're doing against promotions, and I'm trying to get them to order more. And so what they can do now, and almost again near real time, is they dig in on Southern Retail. You'll notice at the right, I see a very similar chart, but the data has now drilled for that specific customer. And I can work the next one in my list, and what you're going to see is the chart on the right will now change. And so you'll notice it is now tailoring itself and showing me data, again, back out of that central data store in near real time. And as I go from partner to partner, I can start to see that data.
That is really great. But now I gotta stress here, I want to make sure everybody understands that the data that they're seeing, those charts, are from external systems. They're not from within the CRM. So you're not seeing a report based on the share. You're seeing data from multiple systems, not stored in CRM, but viewed in CRM to give you insights into that customer you're looking at, right?
Yep, great. Kevin, thank you for making that sure that's very clear to everybody. Again, we're not moving into this is thousands of transactions that are occurring on a weekly basis. So to try and sync that into Sugar would be a major exercise and be error prone. But no, this is looking live into that data that's coming out of those operational systems. And Kevin, actually, to kind of carry on from your question, a lot of times what we get asked is, okay, well, great, so I get this nice little chart, but I want to go a layer below. And I want to see now, what is the breakdown on this? But what's interesting is because the BI tool is available to me sitting on top of that data, I can, now get into detailed data. And I can even dig in if I wanted to into an individual week or a day. And even more important, let's say that I'm on with Powder Supplies and I said, hey, I notice your general merchandise trend is not doing as well as we would expect. And they say, well, I don't believe you. And so what you can say is, well, here, let me send that to you. And you would then very quickly, taking advantage of the BI tool now, that's going to pop that out into an Excel spreadsheet. And I could send that literally while I'm on the phone with that partner and say, here, let's talk through why that seems to be a downward trend right now, other than the 9th. And so we can start to have those conversations with them. And again, this is this idea of put the data where the user is working. Don't make them go into another tool, make it available and make it available in context. So again, it's taking advantage of that idea of modern data warehouse to do that type of capability.
And the system, not just the CRM system, but the whole system, all these source systems, these source line of business tools need to be plumbed. You have to have the plumbing in place. But once the plumbing's in place, then you can start asking these questions. Then you can start building these reports. Then you can start cross-correlating data. But you can't do that until you've plumbed the whole system. Is that right?
You got it, Kevin. That's absolutely correct. And like Jordan was showing, is these outputs, if this was something that you wanted to show to an executive instead of somebody living in Sugar, you take these same analytics sets and you make those available in other tools. So again, is this idea of now embedding it, where it's needed. And the next demo I'm going to show in a second is going to take it up at the executive level, and we'll actually get outside, the CRM, ERP tools at that point. So that's one example. And what we thought we'd do next is kind of show a third one, and then we'll kind of wrap up and do some Q&A. So this is this idea of embedding dashboards near real time inside your line of business system. And just like Jordan said, that it doesn't have to be Zendesk, this doesn't have to be Sugar. It could be other CRM tools, Salesforce, Dynamics, etc. But the same pattern applies. And the last one is really, think of this now as the opposite need. This is another organization that we've dealt with. Again, a manufacturer. In this case, though, they sell primarily direct, and they have a long lifetime with their customers. So a lot of recurring sales, a lot of consumables, essentially. And so it's very much around account management. And they're in an industry that doesn't have I guess I would just say the promptest payers in the world. And so AR is a really important thing. One of the big things they want to do is they want to make sure they're not shipping consumable product to a customer that's not paying in a timely fashion. Because just like most manufacturers today, they want to prioritize their shipments based upon high margin, prompt paying clients. And so in this case, what they wanted to do for their executive management team and then their middle management team is give them the ability to get visibility into what was occurring with those direct sales teams. And then also for that direct sales team, they wanted to be able to let them see some of the accounts receivable information without having to log into the finance system. So the system I'm going to show you actually has 6 different sources coming into it. Again, that same idea, but this is the dashboard that they go in on I think someone here said they had over 10 KPIs. Same thing with this organization. This is just one of their dashboards, but they do a lot of management by KPIs. There is a little bit of a predictive component in here, which Jordan talked about, which is predicting sales based upon what's been invoiced and what's in the pipeline. And then you can see up here, I've scrambled the data, so that's why some of the numbers look a little unusual. But what they've also got is some housekeeping. So this is looking into those various systems, basically saying what needs to be updated. What opportunities have not been followed up on, what invoices are in there without an opportunity. Do we have activities scheduled against all these clients? And then down here at the bottom is it showing the paid status, who's paid, who's not paid. And behind each of these is a detail view. And in that detail view, they can literally go see who are these 413 orders that have not been paid in the last 90 days. And so right from this dashboard, they can drill into data that basically is coming from those 6 different source systems. Wow. As Jordan mentioned, this is all related, it's all blended. So you don't have to worry about where the system is coming from. You just focus in on what the data informs.
Yeah, that is really, that's powerful. That is very powerful.
Yeah, so here I'm drilling in on the pipeline. I won't click this. This will go into their CRM tool. They can drill into the invoice data. So I can go here and I can see who those bad payers are. And I scramble the data, but I can drill in here. And I can even in here hover on a document and I then get the invoice detail. Again, because this is direct sales and account management, it is very important when the sales individual is talking to a client, they can literally pull up by invoice number, by line item, and tell them, basically what the lack of payment order is associated with. And then they do spend a great deal of time on this housekeeping as they do their one-on-one reviews with their sales team. That is a big focus, especially on the missing activity on key clients. So I think the big thing here is it shows when you start to treat data as that really critical asset in the organization and you bring it into that modern data platform that Jordan was describing, now you can really start to see data all the way across that customer life cycle. And to me, this is a great example of how one organization is actually doing that.
Yeah, that's great. Now, we've talked about line of business tools, CRM and accounting, ERP, things like that, customer support. But this could extend to things like IoT. The shop floor. You can pull data off your shop floor as a manufacturer, couldn't you?
It's funny. Yeah, we're doing some early work with a couple, customers in that area where I think Jordan mentioned earlier. That's where you get into the really exciting stuff around, kind of predictive analytics. Can I look, at a machine, its lifetime, its use, the things it's reporting back to me, like temperature, and start to predict that I may have a failure coming, and then take some sort of, prescriptive action on that. But that's where this starts to get really exciting. My only caution on that is you got to do the plumbing work first to get all that data together. And that's a great example where the learning helps, because now if you do have unit failures that you didn't predict, you pump that data back in and figure out why we weren't able to predict it. We didn't catch that, the temperature started rising just slightly, 90 days before the failure. And then now this is where AI is great. It'll pick that up as one of the things to start to monitor.
And a human, you could be looking at a chart of the characteristics of a machine, but the human may not pick it up. But if you look at a lot of pieces of data, AI could pick up trends of how data relates to each other. And that trend may not be noticeable to you and me, but the AI notices it and say, this is the kind of thing that typically leads to machine failure. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, that's where I'll let if there's a question there, Jordan can get into the on my pay grade to talk about how that stuff works. But so what we thought we'd do now is just kind of open it up for Q&A, and then we'll do a little wrap up here at the end.
Okay. Yeah, we do have a lot of questions. This is great. I can see that a lot of people are interested. So the first question, and it is pretty basic. How long does something like this take? We talked about the plumbing. How long does it take to plumb and then implement something like this?
Jordan, you want me to answer that, or you want to? I can kind of give you.
I'm happy to take that, or you want to start? I can get to the more of the technical side.
No, I'm gonna let the implementer answer that. I'm more on the business development side, so he'll say I overpromise. So I'll let Jordan answer.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah, but I would say, really, it starts with having, the champion inside, so someone that's really, bought in on this. But once you have that internal buy-in and it's really becoming a top level initiative for the organization, really that foundational layer you can start in just a couple of weeks. So, while a lot of the times we show 6, 7, 8 systems connected, you can start with as little as 2 and 3, and just get started. Automate and start collecting this data for 1 or 2 processes. So really that foundational layer you can get started, quickly. And then what's nice is once you have that foundational, you just start to layer on top of that. And so it really is kind of a quintessentially never-ending journey where once you start connecting some data, that hunger for more data comes in, and then you start connecting more systems, et cetera. But again, we've seen implementations everything from anywhere from kind of like 4 to 12 weeks to get them up and running, getting some really unique insights and dashboards. So within a quarter, you can really make a big shift in your organization in terms of how much data you're consuming and using.
Jordan, can you give us an example of one of those foundational characteristics, one of the things that you have to understand first? Just one example. Would it be number of data points, definitions of data? What would that be?
Yeah, a lot of it's kind of what we mentioned earlier. So even at the foundational layer, how do you just get that data into a single view? And sometimes that's querying APIs, sometimes it's importing files, sometimes it's really just that technical piece. And then sometimes it's what I call kind of massaging the data. So some systems will structure it one way, some will structure it another. So there's just a little bit of that foundational work to make sure that you have what I call kind of your base models in place. And it's, like I said, a little bit technical and a little bit of, the subject matter experts inside the business. So while your CRM system may have 10,000 quote unquote customers, really only about 6,000 of those matter. And so how do we filter out kind of the signal versus noise? So how do we, get rid of some of the noise? It's not important. So then you have the trusted data sources, and you build off of that. So then once you have those 6,000, how do you segment to your most likely to buy? And so what are the indicators there? So it's both technical, and then it's also, who knows the business, who can categorize this data, who can put those definitions in place.
And I'd imagine I know, because I was working with one company or one organization in higher ed. They needed a referee, I called it, because they had multiple departments, and this was higher ed, and the multiple departments defined an alumnus in a different way.
Right.
And so you needed, this part of their foundational exercise was a referee to decide what is the definition of an alum. So I guess that's also part of the foundation. Okay, another question. And this is going to span lots of people, I'm sure, have this question. What size company should you be to start looking at this? Is it, and you mentioned earlier, Jordan, I think you said it was like, 500 million, but it could be smaller, right?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one. Tony, you can kind of add your color too, but
Yeah, good job.
but yeah, we've kind of found that, a lot of times enterprise level clients will have internal data teams. And so they have the healthy budgets where they can hire internally and build this out. I would argue a lot of times, companies as small as, a couple million all the way up to 500 million plus all have this same need, the same challenge. And to be competitive at, your level and who you're competing with, that data can be that valuable asset for you. And what's nice is it is really from a cost standpoint, kind of a pay as you go model. So if you're smaller, you have smaller data sets, it's only cost you X. As it gets larger, obviously the capital investment's a little bit larger, but the value that you're able to pull out can grow with that as well. So there's kind of this quote from Andreessen Horowitz where, every company has become a software company. I would argue the next decade is going to be every company is a data company. And so the sooner you can jump on that and make moves, the more competitive, the more agile you're going to be in your industry.
Yeah, that's what's that old saying, or the data is the new oil. Yeah. Okay, and
yeah, so totally agree with Jordan. It's all sizes. It's just if you're struggling with this or you feel you're spending too much time, cleaning, organizing the data, it's time to look at this. And as Jordan mentioned, it's really consumption based, so the price of entry can be quite low now compared to what it was even 5 years ago.
It's good to know. Okay, got several more questions. I'll try to go quickly. Do I always have to use an expert like BrainSell? Do I always have to use an expert to do this, or is it something we can do ourselves?
I'll take that one, Jordan. Maybe you can provide some color, but yeah, I think certainly you need some guidance typically to do this, at least on the initial sections. And we're going to at the end kind of offer where, BrainSell can certainly be available to do that. So there is some expertise, especially if you haven't done it before, but we do find, and Jordan mentioned this, because this is very iterative, after 1 or 2 cycles of this, if you do have the team and the bandwidth, we do have a lot of our clients that become quite self-sufficient as they go forward. But I would argue where we can kind of help is to shortcut the learning, having done hundreds of these, where we can kind of help you speed up that process and get to the results a little bit quicker.
Yeah, that's a great point. And one of the examples you had earlier was a customer that I'm familiar with too, and they did have the expertise as far as the BI tool goes, but they needed the help getting the data model, the back end, the plumbing. But once the plumbing was in place, then they could expand the use of the BI tool across multiple divisions.
Yep.
And that is a great segue. I might have done that intentionally into the next question that one of our attendees asked. Can we take advantage of other tools we've already invested in? I guess kind of like what I said with Power BI or Tableau. They've got a BI tool, or now, I don't want to scare you, but they've got an ETL tool. What sorts of things can they leverage they already have?
Yeah, I can take that one. So what's nice is this is really all about that holistic experience. You can start to kind of plug and play. So there's the data inputs. So especially if you've bought into line of business system, those become the sources of your data. In the center, you can really leverage some of the common capabilities across clouds that we mentioned. And then even on that ETL side, there's a big kind of movement towards what's called reverse ETL. So if you are going to move that data back into a system, or you need to do some sort of automated reporting or something of that nature, a lot of times those tools where they weren't initially built for that can be tapped in and harnessed for that as well. So there's a lot of what I would call kind of plug and play, where you're not investing in a new line of business system. It's not like a CRM decision. It's more of, how do we create the glue between our existing tools versus having to create a whole new buying process to go buy a new tool.
Okay, great. What is our time? Oh, we got a few more minutes here, a couple more minutes. All right, so last 2 questions here, and I think these are both important and they're kind of related, but what does a typical engagement like this look like? I imagine it's gonna be different for different customers, but typically, what do you folks see? What do you guys see?
Yeah, I'll kind of describe it and let Jordan add color to it, but we try and keep our engagements fairly short, and by short I mean weeks, not months, because as Jordan mentioned, these are very iterative. The only exception to that is if you do have a lot of data sources and we do need to go through kind of what you were describing as that facilitation, where we're trying to now understand how do the systems connect, what are the definitions. That will sometimes have a little bit of time, but it's time well spent to really make sure we put that, again, that overused analogy of putting that plumbing in place correctly. But our goal is to get to output, within a week, a few weeks of effort. I would say on average, these are probably Jordan, 4 to 6 week engagements, kind of on the average. They can be shorter and sometimes a little bit longer, but we do try and move rather quickly. Okay,
great. Now this is my favorite question. Save this for last, because this means that somebody was listening at the beginning when I said think about your situation. So, and I'm just going to read it verbatim. I'm struggling to explain to my leadership team that this project is more than just producing a dashboard. I've heard that personally. How do I articulate? How do I explain this to them? So now that was the question. Is it explain to leadership, this is more than just a dashboard? How do they articulate the time, resources, what's needed, the benefits? Jordan, Tony, what should they say?
Yeah, I'll say kind of two aspects are, to go back to those unanswered questions, is while the BI tools can surface data, if you don't have the plumbing in place, you don't have the right data for the right question. So maybe it is just, hey, what are the questions that we can't answer today that we know are important for our business? So that's kind of one way to flip it. And then I would say the other side is that whole future proofing aspect where, a BI feels very much like a software selection. But it won't necessarily set you up for the long term in terms of being able to, pull that data together, blend it. So if you're setting up for the future, especially, with AI and machine learning, coming up and up, the more you can set that data foundation. And it is beyond, BI tools. How do you set that data foundation? I would say kind of that future proofing, risk mitigation aspect might be a good way to go.
So I'm going to even answer this to some degree, because I was talking to a customer of mine just today, and she was having the problem with 2 pieces of software that were already integrated. She was spending time pulling data out of both in a spreadsheet so that she could, and they have a BI tool. They could be putting this in a dashboard, but she was still pulling things out because it wasn't plumbed. It wasn't organized. The definition in one source as a definition in the other source, they didn't make sense. They weren't matched. And so even though they were integrated and they had dashboards, she was still spending a couple hours a week massaging data, like you said earlier, Jordan, to get it back into a system so that it could be in the dashboard. So I don't know who asked that last question there, but I really like that question.
Yep.
Okay, we're running to the end of our top of the hour here. We've got a call to action. So is your business?
Yeah, and actually kind of leads into that, Kevin, too. And this is one of the areas where, we would be more than happy to help if it is trying to get executive sponsorship or trying to figure out, how much effort there is to get your organization, to be more data driven. We live, eat, and breathe this, so we're happy to offer up a complimentary data health check. Essentially, one of our data plumbers will get on the phone with you, kind of review quickly, just as Jordan mentioned. Think of it as a really quick 6 steps. Understand where your data is, what it is you're trying to accomplish, and then certainly we'll make some suggestions on how to move forward on this modern data path, and also help to identify, what the true ROI would be for that. So email us at growth@brainsell.net or call the phone number there below, and one of us would be more than happy to jump on a call and see if we can help you on this journey to becoming data driven.
That's really wonderful. Good, good, good. All good stuff. Less than a minute left. Thank you all so much. All of our attendees, we had quite a lot of great questions out there. Thank you all for attending. Jordan, Tony, thank you for your wisdom here, your expertise. The live demo, that was really cool to see some of that data. I hope that our customers can take advantage of this. So thank you all very much. This will be on our website, so you can rewatch it. And to whoever asked that question, you can share this with your leadership. Maybe the video will help.
Appreciate it.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, have a great day. Bye-bye now.